John had always thought of his life as comfortably predictable, like one of those mid-tier suburban sitcoms, with perfectly trimmed lawns and overly enthusiastic neighbors who insisted on borrowing sugar at inconvenient hours. He was 36, worked as a software engineer for a mid-sized tech company, and married to Lisa, his high school sweetheart, who now had the uncanny ability to make every conversation feel like a performance review. Their home, a pristine two-story house with a beige facade and white shutters, was the kind of place where the mailbox was always polished, and the dog, a golden retriever named Baxter, had its own designated spot on the living room rug. John was predictable, comfortable, and unquestionably reliable, a fact that Lisa had often described, under the guise of light-hearted teasing, as being too soft. It was on a particularly mundane Tuesday morning that John first noticed the Fishers. Lisa had returned from a business trip to New York, glowing as if she had ingested the city itself, and yet somehow distant, her eyes darting with secrets she refused to share. She spoke of late nights with clients and networking events, all the while maintaining that same rehearsed smile that never reached her eyes. John tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in his chest, attributing it to paranoia, until he found the first anomaly: an earring, small and gold, tucked under the sofa cushions. He knew instantly it was not his, nor was it one of Lisa's. The first clue was like a breadcrumb in a forest of denial. Over the following weeks, John began cataloging everything: receipts for late-night dinners at places he had never heard of, social media interactions with Mark, his best man, that went beyond the normal range of friendship, and the subtle yet unmistakable changes in Lisa's wardrobe and makeup routines. She was now choosing outfits that drew attention in ways that seemed almost aggressive, like a billboard of seduction directed at the world. John, in his quiet suburban existence, felt increasingly invisible, like a ghost tethered to his own living room. One evening, John was scrolling through his phone when a notification popped up from Lisa's account on a shared calendar. There it was: dinner with Mark. The location was a restaurant John had once considered taking Lisa to for their 10th anniversary. He stared at it, the world tilting slightly, his stomach knotted. Mark, the friend who had stood beside him during his wedding vows, had somehow transformed into an unexpected villain in the story of his life. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, public, and infuriatingly cinematic. Later that night, John confronted Lisa. He asked in a calm voice, the kind that preceded emotional explosions in movies, "Who is Mark really to you?" Lisa's response was chillingly nonchalant. She tilted her head, a smirk playing on her lips, and said, "You are just too soft, John. He is more of a man than you." The words landed like lead in his chest. It was not just infidelity. It was a verdict, a judgment, and an assertion of dominance he had never anticipated. The home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage for a betrayal-themed soap opera, each room echoing with the laugh track of his imagined humiliation. John spent the night pacing, visualizing scenarios, some utterly absurd. What if Mark was not human, but a clone engineered to seduce the most unsuspecting husbands? What if Lisa had signed a secret pact with some clandestine society devoted to testing male resilience? The paranoia, half serious and half ridiculous, became a coping mechanism. Every shadow in the hallway, every creak of the floorboards, was a potential clue. The betrayal had metastasized into an all-encompassing theater of suspicion, blending the mundane with the fantastical, a parody of suburban life gone horribly wrong. By the end of the week, John had begun what could only be described as a clandestine operation, the sort of mission usually reserved for spy thrillers rather than marital disputes. He began documenting every interaction, every unexplained absence, every suspicious message. He downloaded software to track patterns, set up alerts, and even considered hiring a private investigator. This meticulous planning, however, was tempered with dark humor. In his mind, he narrated the entire saga in a voice that sounded like a conspiracy theory podcast, complete with dramatic pauses, ominous music cues, and occasional commentary about the absurdity of being betrayed by the person who had once promised to love him forever. Despite the paranoia, John's resolve hardened. The quiet before the storm had become an all-consuming awareness that his life, as he had known it, was unraveling. The betrayal was not just marital, it was cosmic, a slap from the universe designed to force him out of the cozy comfort of suburban predictability. He resolved that whatever came next, he would not react like a man defeated. He would navigate this landscape of cheating, infidelity, and family drama with cunning, wit, and a touch of theatrical absurdity. The tipping point arrived on a Thursday evening that started like any other, but quickly descended into chaos. John had returned from work earlier than usual, a laptop under his arm, planning to surprise Lisa with dinner. The house was quiet, suspiciously so, as though Baxter had been instructed to ignore his master. He placed his laptop on the kitchen counter and noticed the faint glow of Lisa's phone under the sofa cushions. Curiosity and dread collided in equal measure, compelling him to pick it up. The screen illuminated the undeniable truth. Text messages and photos between Lisa and Mark confirmed the worst: infidelity. The betrayal was not a momentary lapse or a fleeting fling. It had a narrative, a timeline, and a level of planning that suggested careful orchestration. John's mind raced with combinations of revenge, legal implications, and social humiliation. Every scenario seemed simultaneously plausible and absurd, like something out of a satirical drama. Lisa walked in at that precise moment, her hair styled perfectly, her lips curved in that same confident smirk that had haunted John's dreams. She did not deny it. Instead, she leaned against the counter, crossing her arms in a posture that was both defiant and theatrical. "John, I thought you already knew," she said. "He is more of a man than you will ever be. You are predictable, soft, and frankly boring." Her words were designed to wound, but also to entertain, as if she were aware she had turned their lives into a macabre stage play. John's reaction was to laugh, at first quietly, then with increasing hysteria. The absurdity of it all, the sheer audacity of betrayal, felt like a Monty Python sketch dressed up in suburban realism. He imagined inserting a laugh track every time Lisa spoke, every time Mark's name appeared on the screen. And suddenly, the drama became a parody, a grotesque theater of human folly. But even parody has its limits. The revelation that Lisa was pregnant with Mark's child transformed comedy into a surreal nightmare. Every step, every glance, every casual remark took on new weight. The family unit, once secure, was now a chessboard with pieces moved by invisible hands of betrayal. John felt trapped between rage, sorrow, and an almost cinematic absurdity. He considered extreme hypothetical scenarios. What if the child had superpowers inherited from Mark, a man whose genetic makeup now posed existential questions to John? What if the neighbors were secretly recording everything for a viral YouTube series about cheating wives? This was also when John's imagination started mixing conspiracy with fantasy. Perhaps Lisa had been recruited by a shadow organization to test male emotional resilience. Perhaps Mark was not just a best man, but a sleeper agent whose mission involved destabilizing John's life. Each night, as John lay awake, he visualized intricate escape plans, revenge plots, and dramatic confrontations worthy of a prime-time television special. Every mundane object in the house, the vase, the couch, Baxter's chew toy, became potential evidence or plot device. The mundane was now sinister. In the daylight, John began observing Lisa more closely, cataloging every subtle inflection in her voice, every flicker of expression. He noted the precision with which she avoided mentioning Mark when others were around, the way her laughter with him seemed rehearsed, almost performative. He felt simultaneously a detective, a betrayed husband, and an absurd protagonist in a story that blended realism with parody. Every act of infidelity became a scene, every betrayal a plot twist. Until John was living in a world where the lines between reality, imagination, and satire blurred completely. The following weeks were a blend of surveillance, subtle sabotage, and theatrical absurdity. John found himself living in a state that was part detective drama, part dark comedy. He had begun labeling every minor infraction in the house as evidence, creating a mental dossier that cataloged Lisa's habits, Mark's every interaction with her, and even Baxter's suspicious behavior, which John began interpreting as accomplice-like in its sly glances. One Saturday morning, he decided to confront the surreal theater head-on. He invited Mark over under the guise of a casual barbecue, the kind that in suburban neighborhoods often ends with a competitive display of grilling prowess and small talk laden with unspoken tensions. John meticulously arranged the backyard, placing drinks, snacks, and utensils with mathematical precision, ensuring that each potential misstep could be leveraged for dramatic effect. He imagined cameras hidden behind the hedge, the barbecue turning into a live-streamed spectacle of betrayal and comeuppance. Mark arrived impeccably dressed, the kind of man whose very presence seemed engineered to provoke insecurity. He shook John's hand with a confidence that bordered on theatrical dominance, the kind of performance that would make a stage actor envious. Lisa hovered nearby, perfectly poised, her smile a practiced mask that revealed nothing yet suggested everything. The dynamic was a grotesque parody of Suburban Civility, a live-action sitcom in which John played the tragically serious protagonist and Mark the charming antagonist. John's first tactic was psychological. Conversation laced with double meanings, questions that tested the boundaries of decorum, subtle compliments to Mark that carried the weight of irony. He recounted stories of their past friendship, highlighting moments where Mark had been helpful, trustworthy, and undeniably loyal, only to contrast them with the present, in which Mark had assumed the role of intruder, seducer, and adversary. Each sentence was a carefully measured dagger, a blend of literary sarcasm and real emotional threat. Lisa's smirk never wavered. The conversation, while polite on the surface, quickly descended into absurdity. John imagined that the barbecue itself was a stage for a clandestine society, one that monitored infidelity, collecting data on human emotional responses for future experiments. He pictured high-ranking officials in dark sunglasses observing from surveillance towers, nodding at his every pointed remark, noting the betrayal of Lisa, and marking his emotional resilience. He began narrating this scenario internally as if he were the host of a conspiracy theory podcast, each twist more preposterous than the last, yet grounded in the visceral reality of his own humiliation. Lisa, sensing John's unraveling, began performing her own brand of dramatic irony. She leaned against the deck railing, adjusting her posture to emphasize confidence, tossing glances at Mark that were carefully choreographed to suggest intimacy without overt action. John interpreted every movement as an act of symbolic dominance. In his mind, the backyard transformed into an arena. The neatly trimmed grass, now a stage for infidelity, themed gladiatorial combat, the barbecue grill, a metaphorical pyre where betrayal and revenge would clash in flames of absurdity. Amid this surreal theater, John conceived a plan, one that merged ingenuity, irony, and revenge. He began to manipulate the narrative subtly, planting evidence of his own wealth, success, and social influence around the house and yard. Rare collectible items, vintage records, and expensive gadgets were strategically positioned to remind Lisa and Mark of his worth, his untapped potential, and the audacity of underestimating him. Every placement was both literal and symbolic, a testament to a man who refused to be a passive victim of cheating, infidelity, and familial betrayal. By evening, the tension had escalated into near parody. Neighbors wandered by, commenting on the unusually animated interactions, unaware of the deeper drama unfolding in suburban daylight. John imagined they were extras in a grand narrative, unwitting participants in a tableau of human folly. He laughed internally at the absurdity, blending outrage with dark humor. Betrayal had become both a personal crisis and an elaborate comedic set-piece, with himself as the central tragicomic figure. As night fell, the confrontation reached its apex. Lisa revealed that she was indeed carrying Mark's child. The revelation, while horrifying, carried with it the same surreal absurdity that had defined the entire saga. John pictured the child as an agent of fate, a symbolic embodiment of both betrayal and parody. He envisioned futuristic scenarios, the baby as a genius, a trickster, or even a secret operative in a family drama of epic proportions. Each thought, increasingly absurd, became a coping mechanism, a way to navigate the surreal labyrinth of emotions that the cheating wife had erected. John finally realized that revenge need not be violent or overt. The greatest vengeance could be lived as a performance, an ironic theater in which every act of infidelity, every betrayal, was documented, observed, and later recounted in a story that highlighted human absurdity. He understood that family, betrayal, and cheating could coexist within a framework of narrative control. The suburban stage, once quiet and mundane, now vibrated with the energy of theatrical drama, parody, and fantastical speculation. The aftermath of revelation and confrontation was neither simple nor linear. John found that he had to invert the narrative entirely, treating reality as a fluid concept, bending events through imagination, exaggeration, and strategic planning. Lisa's smug confidence, Mark's cavalier demeanor, and the tangible presence of impending parenthood forced him to engage with life in a manner simultaneously grounded and absurd. He began documenting daily events, recording conversations, noting gestures, and mapping emotional patterns. Each action by Lisa or Mark was cataloged, annotated, and assigned a narrative function. John imagined future historians, or perhaps future YouTube viewers, analyzing his life as a case study in betrayal, infidelity, and family dynamics gone spectacularly wrong. The entire experience became meta, a story within a story, parody within tragedy. John experimented with reverse psychology and narrative inversion. He began treating the household like a surreal board game, each move of Lisa or Mark a predictable variable he could manipulate with subtlety. The family home was no longer merely a dwelling. It had transformed into a stage where he directed scenarios to test limits, evoke reactions, and maintain control over the absurd drama. Cheating wife, best man, betrayed husband, these roles became characters in a living, breathing theater of the absurd. Lisa's behavior shifted in response to John's subtle manipulations. She began to mirror his own theatricality, escalating the performance. Arguments took on the tone of scripted debates, confrontations felt choreographed, and every minor incident became imbued with layered meaning. John observed that infidelity, betrayal, and family drama, when reframed as narrative and parody, lost some of their immediate sting, replaced by a mixture of strategic amusement and controlled outrage. John's ultimate revelation, however, was philosophical. Betrayal and cheating, while personally devastating, could be reinterpreted as narrative fuel. They were catalysts, not endpoints. Infidelity had opened the door to a new perspective on family dynamics, personal resilience, and the absurdity inherent in human relationships. By embracing parody, conspiracy, and fantasy, John discovered a power of narrative control. He could remain emotionally intact, even as his world was being upended by a cheating wife and a scheming best man. In the final days of this inverted reality, John staged a dramatic dinner, inviting friends, neighbors, and Mark, who had begun to sense that John was no longer the man who would passively endure betrayal. The table was laden with symbolic gestures. Every dish, every drink, every conversation carefully orchestrated to reflect both the gravity of past events and the absurdity of human folly. Laughter, tense glances, and careful commentary filled the room, transforming the betrayal into a performative spectacle that neither humiliated nor erased the past, but instead reframed it. As the night drew to a close, John felt a sense of equilibrium, not closure. He realized that infidelity, cheating, and betrayal would remain as threads in the fabric of his life, yet they no longer dictated the narrative. He had inverted the structure, embraced parody, and infused his existence with fantastical speculation that allowed him to navigate reality with agency and wit. The cheating wife, the best man, and the unborn child became characters in a living story that John directed with intelligence, irony, and unyielding emotional resilience. In the end, the suburban stage remained intact, but John had rewritten its rules. Betrayal, infidelity, and family drama were no longer mere crises. They were instruments of narrative power. The absurdity, the paranoia, the parody, and the surreal speculation became his tools. Cheating wife, Mark, and John himself were no longer merely participants in a tragedy. They were actors in a complex, darkly humorous, and profoundly American story of betrayal, resilience, and the theater of everyday life.